Welcome, the host here with Pixa's Posters and Podcasts. We'll be hosting this podcast, putting a new one out every month. Who is Pixa? We're a Pitt County coalition on substance use, and this podcast will be... My name is Jacob. I'm the host here with our co-host, Lillie Malpass. Pixa has many initiatives, but our biggest one is supporting our community. So I look forward to seeing you here.
Eastern North Carolina, and welcome to the fourth episode of Pixa's Posters and Podcasts. Today we are doing a podcast focusing on our Parents Month, which is going to be in March. So pretty soon, parents, alcohol, about COVID, about other substances, about the pressures that teens are experiencing. We've got a great youth team right now, and they are really passionate about connecting with parents and getting things out there. So we're really excited about what they're doing as well. And today we have Dr. Jennifer Matthews and Wagner Grubb with us today. Both have been involved with Pixa for many, many years, and we're really excited to have them on our podcast today. So I will let them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about yourself. Great. So Wagner, you can go first if you'd like.
Hey guys, I'm Wagner Grubb. I have been in Pitt County since about 1995. I'm married to a physician here who actually was involved in Pixa prior to me and does a lot of work with the opioid epidemic. Great place to live, raise our kids, and we're just really excited to have Pixa in our community as a source of education.
And yeah, thank you so much for having us. I am Jennifer Matthews. I'm a faculty member in health education and promotion at ECU. And I have been a substance use researcher for almost 20 years. And I particularly focus on underage drinking, as well as adverse childhood experiences and trauma as it relates to substance use. So I'll bring that perspective to the podcast.
Awesome. And thank you guys again so much for joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation. It's kind of been in the works for a little while, so I'm glad we're finally doing it. So as obviously most of our audience knows, we've been dealing with COVID for almost a year now, and that is crazy that it's already been almost a year. But what have you guys been seeing? What do you think is impacting teens? And Dr. Matthews, you work at ECU. How has that been affecting Greenville just in general?
Yeah, so we've seen some definite changes because of COVID. From a use perspective, we're seeing a lot more purchasing of alcohol. There's a lot more alcohol at home. I think the latest numbers for Pitt County indicated that on average, alcohol sales have increased about 26% since March 2020. And we haven't seen elevated sales like that in a very, very long time. So, and there's lots of reasons behind why we're seeing that, which we can discuss. But, and then, we are seeing, increased use amongst teens. Teens aren't in school every day. They are at home virtually. Some are at home all the time virtually. They're not seeing their friends like they used to. They're not in sports like they used to. So, it's just had a great impact on their overall mental health, which sometimes can maybe exacerbate or cause them to use substances as a way of coping. But yeah, I mean, definitely some changes. I'll also say that we're seeing differences in like sales. So now we're delivering alcohol, which was something that we weren't doing before. And you can pick up liquor from particular restaurants that are offering it, which is not something we've seen before. So some definite changes in North Carolina as it relates to COVID.
Yeah, I know that's been really big. Some of the youth team were mentioning that a lot of really great restaurants that are normally so good about, checking IDs, they're checking parents on the websites, but then letting teens go pick them up on behalf of their parents. So there's a lot that we've never thought about that we're probably going to have to think about.
It's definitely rethinking how we're doing some of the purchase surveys that we do in Pitt County, and so with some new challenges, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, Wagner, what are you seeing as the parent of teenagers?
Well, so I have four kids as a combination marriage. So we span nearly 17 to almost 20. So we definitely seen COVID impact all of our kids, from high school graduation to first year as college. And being stuck at home, I think the kids are bored. They're, as much as you hear a child say, I hate going to school every day, they really truly do enjoy being able to have the social aspect of school, and that keeps them occupied, maybe entertained. Your teachers would love to hear. I think when they're home, they're able to sleep in, sign in on a Zoom call. There's a greater ability to stay up late, and hang out with your friends a little bit more. Jennifer, Dr. Matthews, you just mentioned, purchasing alcohol is a lot easier. People are not checking IDs like they used to. And as unfortunate as it is, our court systems, I think, understand, our officers understand that they're not able to get in and try these cases. And so it's kind of like this just lockup of a snowball effect that has happened. And it hurt our children, I think, more than anybody else, and given them the opportunity to try something that they may not have otherwise done in any other circumstance. I know for my son, for example, soccer, we're thankful that we have been able to have some of our outdoor sports, but outside of that, teachers are not able to really watch and take account for where kids are when they're signing in to Zoom. So, they can all hang out together when two parents are working. I hate to say it, there can be a party for class.
Right. Yeah. And it's really, I mean, that's obviously not something that would have ever happened before, right? Like it's like a whole different ball game. I think we're seeing some different challenges, like Wagner was talking about with, I mean, just things that we never would have thought about before. And I know that delivery of alcohol in North Carolina was something that was forthcoming, that was passed by legislature last year. But I think because it never was set in place, like there were never guidelines that were specifically enforced. And so it's kind of in this gray area for a while that we've just been sort of navigating. And there are some places that are doing really well with checking IDs. We did some purchase surveys, which is where we send somebody who's 21 to either purchase alcohol online or have it delivered to go, whatever. And there are some places that are doing a really good job with checking IDs. But unfortunately, there are places that are not. And that just makes it easier for youth to access alcohol. So you kind of have this weird like situation where you have, kids who are stuck at home more than they usually would. You have parents who are buying more alcohol than they probably would have before. And there are lots of reasons behind why that could be. They have their own mental health kind of things they're dealing with. And sometimes a drink at the end of the day just helps you unwind. So they have more access at home, but they also are struggling with their own mental health. And it's, like Wagner was saying, there are kids who are sleeping in late, going to bed, later than normal. There's no structure to your day, right? And I know that there are some days working from home that it's hard for me to get motivated to do work. So I can imagine that students are struggling as well.
Well, from a parent perspective, these kids are also depressed. They are losing their childhood. And so, but it's this weird, I can't really express what I'm feeling. I can't explain other than it stinks. It's not fair. And so tied into that boredom and not being in their normal structure, their normal routine, what, and I hate to say, what else is there to do? Places are closed. They can't go and to the rec center and play ball. And so it is a perfect storm. And as a parent, we're in a tough situation because as awful as it sounds, it has almost become more socially acceptable for kids to drink. Well, it's just a party, or it was just this one time. And that rolls into, well, it's every weekend now. And it's the tailgating. And so it's hard as a parent to live in this society where things are a little more normal, to stand up to your kids and say, sorry, no, that's not normal. That is, one, it's against the law. Two, your body is just not able to metabolize that as quickly as, somebody twice your size. And so the effects that you're going to see is catastrophic. Increased risks of accidents at home, increased driving accidents. I mean, the list could go on.
Yeah, and we've seen, I saw some recent data for North Carolina that had overdoses in North Carolina up about 20, I think it was 25 or 30%. And Pitt County is in the top 10 for the state for overdose deaths, and hospitalization. So, I mean, just, and that's also increased since COVID. So it's really not just alcohol, it's also, drugs being an issue. And students were already using alcohol and drugs before. We have data from 2019 that shows that the students, about 1 in 5 are drinking alcohol, 1 in 10 at high risk levels. You have 1 in 5 using marijuana, 1 in 3 using vaping, tobacco or e-cigarettes. And so all of these were already occurring before. And again, like we've been talking about with the struggles and not having the structure, you know that the rates have definitely gone up because of COVID. And again, like as a coping mechanism, like if you're depressed and alcohol or drugs makes you feel better, sure, one weekend might be one weekend, but if you feel those effects and you're like, wow, this makes me feel really good, then you might be willing to continue to use it because it does help you lift it. It makes you feel better.
And talking to kids.
Absolutely. And that's something that, sorry, I was just going to say that that's something that the youth team has brought up a lot, is that mental health is there. So we were talking about, parents aren't really sure how to talk to their kids about some of this stuff. I mean, kids aren't sure how to talk to their parents.
It's a tough balancing act. I will be honest. I can tell you that it's never a good idea to just bust up in there and try and have a serious conversation, because they're going to shut down. And I get it. I don't understand really truly what they're going through, because when I was in high school, thinking of this would be completely foreign. But I tend to have better luck when I'm talking to my kids when it's just a very casual conversation and there is not this feeling of trying to catch you doing something, or, I'm trying to peg one of your friends as being the bad boy or the bad girl. So I will say it is a tough conversation. And for kids, they have the peer pressure to feel like they need to be accepted in this group. And right now, maybe their group is different than what they were with in school. If they were in school and they were in sports, maybe their friends were a little different than the group that's hanging out in their neighborhood. And for better or worse, maybe different decisions are being made. And it's the same for parents. Listen, I'm in my upper 40s and I still feel peer pressure every day from trying to make sure that I'm fitting in with the parents and making sure that I'm, when kids are over at my house, they don't feel like they're too many rules. So it's a balancing act and it's tough. So for the kids who are kind of facing this kind of weird depression right now, they don't want to admit it. I think Dr. Matthews made a really good point. I don't know that it's necessarily they want to drink. It's just, it gives them something to do. They kind of can forget about it for a little bit. They're fitting in that group. And then what?
Yeah, I think the key point, and I'm not going to be an expert in how to talk to my kids because I mean, I have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So I'm sort of on the other end of the spectrum and hopefully have a few years before we start to have these real conversations. But I will say that the key thing is just having a conversation. It's definitely tough. And no one's going to say that it's an easy conversation. And I'm sure kids will roll their eyes and completely act like oh my gosh, mom, I can't believe you're asking me about this. But I think that some of them will tell you deep down, they actually like that you are checking in. They're not going to act like it because they're too cool for that. But they actually like that you're checking in, that you're asking them, and maybe it's not even, hey, are you drinking? but more of what are you doing? How is school going? Can I, is there something I can help with? Like just engaging them. And that will then help maybe further along some other conversations. One of my sons is only 4, and I mean, him and I talk every night. And sure, right now it's like, what's your favorite toy and what's really exciting that happened in your day? But my hope is that we develop the rapport and I can develop that with the other children too, to where they feel comfortable coming to me and talking to me about things. So starting those conversations early can be, and not necessarily about drugs and alcohol, but really just about them, can hopefully help lead to that in the future. But yeah, it's definitely not going to be an easy conversation. And for those of people who might want to learn more concrete ways to have those, SAMHSA has excellent information on their website about talking to their kids. And we're going to be launching a parents page at PCCSU, and that will have some of that information as well. So definitely check some of those out. There's also Talk It Out with the state of North Carolina, which also has some really good information about talking to your kids about substance use. So just some resources if you need those right now.
Yeah, those are all really great resources. Wagner, jumping off some of the great stuff we've already been talking about. So I know that you said that even at your age, you're still experiencing some of that peer pressure and a lot of things that come up in conversations about parents who have children who are using substances or just even experiencing mental health is they don't want to talk to other parents because they're scared of what other parents are doing. So, or going to think about that. So how can parents get comfortable talking to each other and getting advice from each other?
That is such a hard question. And one that I've broached, obviously, with 4 kids, when talking with parents. I have learned that you get a lot farther with love and talking with somebody with an open heart. It's just a very tough situation when you have different perspectives of what is right and wrong. Unfortunately, I think I mentioned before, our society seems to have moved to this more norm for kids to drink underage. And I don't know if it's our area. It tends to be a little more open. But parents are really good if you can sit down and kind of explain the situations and some of the risks. And again, not necessarily jump right into it as, hey, our kids are all out drinking and, you're okay with it. I'm not okay with it. What are we going to do? So it's tough. I wish I had a better answer. I wish I were better at talking with them. I do think, going through some of the points of information on risks and really saying, hey, this is happening. We can't turn a blind eye, because once we do that, they're going to get bored with drinking. And then what are they going to do? And I know there's a lot of research. Dr. Matthews can probably talk on this, where drinking leads into marijuana use. I will tell you, being a parent of teens and having friends, I have seen that. I see that they get bored with one thing and they go to another. That's just human tendency. So I truly believe that taking that first step and talking to those parents and saying, hey, here's what I see is going on, or here's what we're hearing is going on. Can we work together? And try and stop that before it moves on to that next. because Dr. Matthews is correct. Opioid abuse right now during COVID, I don't even think we've touched the tip of this iceberg to see what has happened. I think we're going to see this over the next, year with our numbers increasing. And to me, that's incredibly scary because this is my group of kids.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, we keep talking about, what we're seeing in the data with opioid use increasing and alcohol use increasing. And usually those are sometimes or oftentimes those are co-occurring. So where they're drinking alcohol and abusing prescription drugs or using prescription drugs at the same time. But I think that we're going to start to see more of that in the numbers. So I agree. I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg at this point. And I'll also say, as a mom, and again, I have small children, but mom guilt's a real thing. And there's definitely some mom shaming that goes on in our culture. And so, it's hard being the parent that doesn't want their kids to use alcohol at home. And, I encourage parents to monitor the alcohol at home. If you have, a refrigerator full of beer, know how many beers are in it. So that way you can kind of tell whether or not your kids might be grabbing one. And if you think, oh, I definitely didn't have 5 beers last night, but there's 5 beers gone, then perhaps there's something else going on at home. Or even locking up your alcohol. PCCSU has alcohol locks that we can provide if you want an alcohol lock. But just monitoring all of that stuff at home no one wants to be that parent, but in the culture that we're in right now, being that parent may save your kid's life. I think I've also learned over the years that parents kind of fall into 2 categories. There's some parents that are like, that's not my kid. My kid is not drinking. My kid is not using drugs. Like, that is definitely not my child. And, that very well may be the case, but it might not. And I would tell parents, like, do you want to find out that is in fact your child if you get down the road and they're using harder drugs and have a much larger problem where it's affecting their life? I mean, no one wants to see that for their parent or for their child. So I think that I am and this is my public health background. Like, I just want to know, like, if you see my kids doing any of this stuff, you better call me and tell me. Because I want to know those things. But I think sharing my expectations with other parents, with my friends, that I don't want my kid served alcohol at your house. So I'm not okay with that. But knowing my expectations from other parents and making those known, well, yes, that's probably not going to make me a popular mom. In my opinion, I would rather have my kids safe or safer, because there's no guarantee that they're completely safe. And it's just hard. I mean, look at did we see the news article where I think it was a couple of weeks ago, the 16-year-old boy bought fentanyl-laced drugs off of Snapchat? The parents they are very well-known parents across the country. I mean, the mom, she is somebody that speaks on lots of different occasions about her area of expertise, and she had no idea that this was going on in her home. And so that's just both a sign of the times and, like, being more aware, but also a sign of perhaps maybe this kid really didn't have any issues before, but was struggling because of COVID and everything being piled on top, right? Like, they're missing out on it. 16 years old, you're missing out on a lot. And so that could be a sign of some other mental health issues as well.
Well, and I'll touch on one thing too, because you made me think about this, Dr. Matthews. As a parent, our kids, I have parents who would rather say, hey, I'd rather have my children in my home drinking than not know where they are and then be out riding around. So that's one of the issues and I totally understand it. I get it. What I have found is our house has kind of become this almost, I hate to say safe haven, because it's one that, listen, we can go to Wagner's house and all hang out, and there's not this stress of having to say yes or no to alcohol, because Wagner's not allowing it. It can't come here. You want to, we're very fortunate. We are very lucky to be able to have a pool and hang out, and the kids love it. And so as hard as it was kind of growing up through that little stage, which you're getting ready to transition into, Dr. Matthews, being kind of that, sorry guys, we'll have a New Year's party, but there's no drinking. It is very upfront, and it really is nice, I think, for the kids to be able to have somewhere to go, knowing we don't have to even worry about it, saying yes or no, whether it's a peer pressure thing for them. But for the parents that are in the ball camp of, I'd rather have them at my house than driving around, I totally understand that. I totally understand wanting the kids at your home. It's just one of the ways that is really easy to touch on that is if that child leaves your home and has an accident, you are responsible. And that's an unfortunate situation.
Not to mention, and I just want to say this because it's, this will be given to the public, but like it is illegal. So
yeah, totally illegal. Like
right?
against the law. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I get, like, I think that, I grew up during a time when I think parents were starting to get into the feeling that I'd rather you drink at home. I can remember, graduation parties and prom parties and things like that, where people were like, parents were like, I'll give it to you, just you have to stay here. And so, I understand the mindset, but the fact of the matter is you're, allowing that could potentially open the kids up to using other substances. So it doesn't necessarily stop at just alcohol. And not every kid that uses alcohol is going to, develop a substance use issue. It's actually only a small proportion of them, but it can affect larger portions of your life. And a child's brain's not done developing until 25. So you're, perhaps causing some brain damage as you're exposing, the child to these substances, and they're taking these substances. So that's also something to consider, that the brain development doesn't stop until 25. Mm-hmm. I sound like a parent. My kids are not going to have any fun. They will have fun. They will
survive. I can tell you. We're not done yet, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they still love us.
Right. That's the point, right? Like, be a little firm with them, but they'll still love you in the long run, right?
Right. That's right.
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception that you guys keep mentioning, that it is illegal. I do think that some parents don't realize that it's not okay to provide their child with alcohol. Because I know when I was in high school that rumor was kind of going around that, yeah, you can just provide your kids with alcohol as long as it's your kid, your house. That's legal. And the youth team was, before COVID, we were in the works of doing a PSA and showing the legal ramifications of that. But we just got to get the word out there that it is in fact illegal, and there are pretty serious consequences that can happen from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say, looking at some of the Pitt County data, because again, we do have Pitt County data, it's very clear that the high school kids in Pitt County know that their parents don't necessarily disapprove of having alcohol at home. So I think it was roughly 45% did not think that their parents would think it was a big deal. And most of the students in high schools reported getting their alcohol from home. And just as an aside from that, most of the time it's liquor. So if you start seeing your liquor cabinet being watered down with water or some other substance that's meant to look like whatever it is they're drinking, I would take notice in that.
Yeah. Well, do you guys have any advice for, we've been talking a lot about parents and what they can do, but having these conversations, and I know that the very first thing you want to do when your parents tell you not to do something is go out and do it. So what about teenagers who are rebelling? How do you work through that?
Wagner, you have teenagers.
Probably a very difficult one.
It is. We all make decisions that are not the smartest when we are, as a teen and even in our 20s. And so I think part of it is a learning, growing exercise. I think part of it is a relationship building for the parent and their child, because I know my children aren't perfect. I know I'm not a perfect parent. And so I know that there are stumbling blocks that are being put in front of our kids every single day. And to think that your child isn't going to try any of them is really going to set you up for some pretty big disappointment later. So I know for us, it is definitely a learning experience. And I can tell you that most of our kids have either gone back and said, oh gosh, yeah, that was probably not the smartest thing. And of course, you're in the back of your mind thinking, I could have told you that. I may or may not have made that same mistake when I was your age. So I think for our kids, just knowing that, yes, they are faced with so much right now, and they are having to adjust to so much right now. So while we can't turn a blind eye and let them do these things, we need to be talking to them daily. It's just like Dr. Matthews said, when we sit down at dinner, we're not necessarily talking about everything that's the stress. We're talking about, hey, you went and played soccer today or went to the golf course, or what's going on on Snapchat. Show me some of these little memes that they're doing. Yeah, I don't know anything about them, and some of them are quite funny. And so it kind of gives you that relationship, and it also opens that door to, hey, you remember that time? And so I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think parents think that they can't influence their kids, right? Like that they're high school kids, they're teenagers. There's not a whole lot I can do to influence them. And that's really wrong. They're looking for you to provide guidance. Don't be afraid to share your expectations. Don't be afraid to set rules and enforce those rules. But also, kids are going to make mistakes. It's just a fact. I make mistakes daily. And so it's just a fact of life. But, approaching it from a no judgment zone, where kids feel comfortable talking to you about things, and they know that as a parent, you're going to be there and listen and not judge them for the decisions that they're making, because you might have to remind yourself that you were in the exact same position, years before too. But that not having that judgment piece can really open kids up to, wanting to talk. I would also say to, what aren't they saying, right? Like if you hear every day that they're playing with, John somewhere, and then all of a sudden they're not hanging out with John anymore. Like, why, what happened to John? Where is he? Where is Susie? It could be in what they're leaving out of those conversations that you might need to be paying attention to. So sometimes it's not about what they're saying, because I doubt a kid, maybe a kid might, but I doubt a kid's going to be like, oh, I'm struggling with this today. But it might be a pattern of some of the things that they might be leaving out or saying that without explicitly saying what's wrong. So some of it's just about being a good listener whenever you are at dinner and having a family conversation. But engaging is it's so crucial to trying to help teens, and not even just with substance use, but with like everything teens face. That conversation is really good. Look at parents, I don't know what I would do without some of my friends that have helped me over the past year deal with COVID and 3 small children. So if it's essential for me, then I would think engaging is equally, if not more important for kids as they're engaging with their parents. So, but definitely set some rules, set some expectations, and just really be aware, don't ignore your kids just because they're in their room. Just be aware of your child and their life and what's going on.
That's true.
A lot of really good things. So do you guys think it's a good idea or a bad idea? Because we're talking about remember all the mistakes that we made. So do you talk to your children about that, or do you pretend that when you were in high school you weren't doing any of that? What do you think the best way to go about some of that stuff?
I can tell you from my experience, I'm an open book. So I definitely do talk with the kids on, paths that I've walked that have led, some of them are great and some of them I would have changed had I listened to my parents or my teacher or a boss of some sort. So yes, I typically think one, it establishes some trust with them. We are parents, and let me tell you, one of the things I will throw it out there, and I can assure you, you will get a little bit of backlash on this. Parents aren't friends. We're parents. We're the ones who have to have the rules. We're the ones that do set the expectations. But I also, that can flip and become a child who never wants to speak to you again. So there is a balance of having that level of trust and friendship, um, knowing that, look, I'm not going to likely, my son's not going to sit down and probably share everything he's sharing with his buddy. But I do know that he feels that's exactly right. Yeah. I have 3 boys and a girl, and so I hear lots of boy stuff all the time. And yeah, you're right. I don't want to hear all that all the time. But I love the fact that he appreciates that I'm at least not saying, "Hey, I was the best child ever, and I never ever did that." It makes it real.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, like, I don't want to lie to my children. Like, even, like I tell my son, he always talks about how he might have had a bad day. And by his bad day, that means that I, probably disciplined him for some reason, put him in timeout for something. And, but I'm very upfront with the kids about that. I make mistakes too. You are never going to have a day that you just completely are mistake free. Sometimes they're big mistakes, sometimes they're small mistakes, but nonetheless, like especially as a parent, I make bad judgments all the time as a parent. But I think that when it comes to talking to your kids about your own history, sure, I mean, you can be honest if they ask, and maybe it at least lets them know that you were once in their shoes too, because I think sometimes it's hard for kids to say, I mean, like, you never did this, mom, right? But so it establishes some of that. Just don't glorify it, don't put it in a way that's like, oh, look at me, I was, chugging beers at 6. I mean, like, don't glorify it, because then they see that you are, and in your 40s or 50s, and you're still glorifying what you did as a teenager. That's really not modeling great behavior. I mean, it's not really something for them to, they're not learning anything from that, other than that you at least had a positive experience with it, right? Because 20 years later, you're still talking about it. So I think that there's a way to do it in a way that establishes the trust, like Wagner was talking about, and gives you some credibility to understand that you were once there, but without glorifying the behavior. And at least making it known that you don't condone the behavior as either from your children.
Oh yeah, typically they always, and that's, I think, and I can tell you, my children will not learn this until they have children of their own, because I didn't. It typically led to an outcome that was less than optimal. I probably got in a lot of trouble for this, or didn't get to play in my basketball game because of this. And, maybe you should learn from that so you don't do the same thing. I think that is the lessons that we all would love to shake it into our children. Do as I say, not as I did.
But just know that they're probably going to do as you did, right?
Yes.
Like, and having that, like, that non-judgment, open conversation ability to, is very important.
Yeah. Well, I just have a few more things I just kind of want to just ask you guys. So, what do you think? We've talked a lot about, parents' use in the house. Well, what do you think about parents drinking in front of their kids and not even necessarily drinking to excess, but do you think that sets standards, or do you think that impacts whether or not their teen is going to drink?
I'll tell you, growing up, my parents never drank in front of us. And certainly, if my father or mother opened anything in front of my grandmother, I think she would have pulled a switch and used it on my dad. So um, I grew up in a household that you did not drink in front of your parents at all. We, in our home, we drink wine. And we do with dinners, we do not have drinks every day, but our kids do know that we drink wine. I don't know that that necessarily gives them the okay. I guess you could say that once we've gotten to the age we are, and we appreciate that, they do understand that. I do have a little bit of an issue with kids tailgating with their parents on football fields. To me, I think, that opens the door. And that is kind of the carte blanche of, I'm the cool parent, I'm hanging out and I'm drinking. So that's a tough question. I don't know statistically. Dr. Matthews, you may know something.
Yeah, so research does suggest that parental modeling is a huge influence on teen alcohol use specifically. But modeling good, responsible alcohol use, which is typically 2 drinks for men and 1 drink for a woman per day, and really not every day. I think it's no more than 5 drinks in a week for a woman, 7 drinks in a week for a male. So, modeling that having a glass of wine for dinner is perfectly fine, and shouldn't really, give a teen sort of the idea that, an unhealthy use, or drinking is unhealthy to begin with. But I also think that oftentimes, like, I hear my mom friends like, oh my gosh, I need a glass of wine to just deal with the day. So what that tells a kid is that, your coping mechanisms for handling daily stress or things that might be going on in your life, that you're relying on alcohol to do that. So that might send a message that says, well, if I want to de-stress, maybe alcohol is my way to do it. So just doing it as if you would have a glass of water or a cup of coffee. There's the research, doesn't demonstrate any needs to avoid that, but definitely the tailgating, the heavy alcohol use, the drinking multiple glasses of wine every day, can be indicative of a child who might see that as being, okay, even as they get older. So. I think, so I'll also add, I think, just like with food, it's about a healthy relationship, right? Like, so if you're using like donuts or unhealthy foods and you have an unhealthy relationship with food, then that teaches sort of the nutrition patterns of your children. I would say the same thing works with alcohol.
It's a very good point. I feel like people they're watching their parents, and that's what some of the youth team members are expressing. They see what their parents are doing, and they're always listening, even when parents don't think they're listening. They're listening, and they're picking up what's going on, and even young kids are picking up what's going on. So it's got to be a little understanding of that fact as well. What do you guys think about social media? I know that social media leads to a lot of thinking that we're partying, thinking that we're doing all these things, thinking that teens should be a certain way and act a certain way. You don't have teens yet, Dr. Matthews, but will you follow your kids on social media? Will they be able to have social media sites that you don't have? Because I know a lot of parents don't really have Snapchats, but a lot of teens do.
Yeah, my kids, I will follow my children on social media. I have ideas of things that I want, and who knows? I mean, like I said, my kids are 5, 4, and 2. So, 10 years, who knows what social media platform is going to be available? Because I feel like Facebook will be completely outdated by then. But yeah, I believe in monitoring, but not in a way that is intrusive, in that I don't trust you, right? Like, I think part of it is you develop it so that they are learning proper ways to handle whatever emails, text messages, social media. I mean, and then and they earn the right to have more freedom as they, progress, right? So, but my husband's a high school teacher, and I cannot tell you how many times he's talked about social media and kids sending pictures, inappropriate pictures to one another. And so part of that is you have to know what's going on. But I also feel like if I bought you a phone, then I'm going to know what's on that phone. So yeah, I think it's tough, right? You kind of want this, you want to build this independent child, and you want them to learn to be independent people. But you also, I want to know what's on your phone. So it's a fine line to walk, right?
It is. And social media, from a parent perspective, same thing. I bought the phone. I know the phone. The phone is mine. You're borrowing the phone. And so I follow all of our kids on all of their social media accounts. And if I can't, then you don't have the phone. But I think that social media has glorified underage drinking. And so I think that is one of the reasons that we are seeing an increase. There are so many little skits. They're not skits anymore. That shows my age. Memes, whatever they're doing on these TikToks.
Right.
And so it's funny, and it garners interest, and it's popularity. And so it's really easy to send a picture on Instagram or Snapchat or through social media and say yes to something quickly, because it's just typing. You're not seeing anybody, you're not talking to anyone. And then all of a sudden, hey, I just sent a picture, or I just accepted an invitation to go to this party. And so you show up, and you've built this almost like fake, personality of, I'm a really cool person and I do all of these things, where internally you may not want to do those things. You're kind of walking into a situation that you've created unwillingly. And I think part of it is, maybe it's because mindsets, they don't mature until they're 25. And so they don't realize that when they're texting these things or sending these things or accepting these invitations, they're actually sending these to people that now have them forever. And so when you walk into that party, for example, if you accepted that invitation to come attend because they think you're really cool because of the silly things you've done on Snapchat or TikTok, now you have to live up to that and maybe take part in something you didn't want to do. It opens the door. And I see it time and time and time again. Our kids just don't know how to communicate personally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's way easier to text someone. Listen, I'm just as guilty.
Right.
I will text somebody in a heartbeat because I really either don't think I have time to get into the conversation. And so I think social media has exponentially increased underage drinking. Obviously, you said earlier somebody bought, some illegal substances from Snapchat. The roadway that it has opened is just crazy.
Yeah. And, if you think about it, right, like the idea behind Snapchat or any of these is like, you want people to like your photo or to share it or, whatever, so that you get a certain number of views. And so we've built sort of this culture of, well, they must not like me if I only have 5 likes on that post. So I might do things to get more likes, or that's Instagram, which is really outdated. I don't even know what you do with TikTok. Like, do you share the videos and just get more views? So that just shows my age as well. But it's to get people to like you, to fit in, to belong. And that's ultimately what any teen wants, is they just want to find a place where they belong. And if that means they have to be somebody else while they're trying to figure out how to do that, then that very well may be what they do. And I talked about the brain development, and your brain doesn't fully develop until 25, and the last sort of part that's developing is your frontal lobe, and that's where all your executive decision making occurs. So your impulse behavior, the thinking about how things that you decide to do now will affect you 10 years down the road. Like, teens quite literally don't have the capability to make those types of decisions responsibly, because they don't have the brain development to do it. So I think that's where some of some parental monitoring might be helpful, or even you walking alongside of them as they're trying to make some of these decisions. But they're not going to they're definitely not always going to make the best ones, because they don't have the brain function to make those, and they're still trying to figure things out. Sometimes I wonder if my brain functions like fully developed, because I'm still trying to figure it out too. But yeah, and that our intense desire to be liked and to belong. Because I'm an older mom, so my kids are, I'm almost 40. And so my kids are relatively young compared to people my age. And I still feel the pressure to do things that my mom friends are going to be like, oh, that's really cool. Or I don't want to be, I want to fit in with my mom friends too. Right. So that doesn't go away with age. And I think that part of it is just to help raise kids to have some values outside of perhaps social media, but that is so difficult to do when even as adults we still look to that for confirmation of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I know some youth are still using Instagram and stuff, but TikTok seems to be the biggest thing. And you do get the likes, you do get the comments, and a lot of people have been talking about going viral on there. And we're seeing, TikTok's been around for a little while, but you can see all of these people their age who have gone viral and now have tons of money and sponsorships and huge things just because of these silly little videos that they're just recording. So I think a lot of that is trying to do some of those things to go viral, but they're not really understanding that, what you do at 15 can sometimes follow you depending on what you're doing at 15. So
I would also like ask, as and I have young children, so this is like my naivete when it comes to having young kids versus teenagers. But if I have a child who constantly needs to get money via social media presence and some of the stuff that they do, I might also wonder what else is going on that they're not getting what they need from any other place besides what that social media platform can provide through likes and things like that. And trust me, listen, if I understand the temptation to want to have your kids be able to make money, like, because they cost a lot, right? So to have that extra income definitely seems super tempting. But I wonder, like, what is it that those kids are missing? Because we've seen several of them over recent years who have committed suicide or who have overdosed on drugs. And so, what else is going on in that kid's life that's preventing them from feeling that sense of belonging that they're really only getting from being able to, from their TikTok viewers, right? So that's just probably my way deep thought into it.
I agree. And it's kind of, when we grew up, it was the magazines, for girls, we felt like we had to look like this girl who was like on 17 and, perfect hair, perfect body, perfect, we felt this need. And if we didn't have the clothes, the body, the hair, the makeup, the whole 9 yards, people wouldn't like us. Mm-hmm. And, that was such a small facet now, because nearly every child has access to social media. And so it's broadcast out there so heavily. And, I hate to say it, but it's so fragmented, because with all of the followers these kids are expecting their clicks, that's what they genuinely feel is how they're accepted. And so if I can get more clicks by holding like a vape pen, even if I don't vape, it's the, oh my gosh, did you see so and so? You know? And so I think our kids, and that's a really hard time. It's a good question for the youth team, I think. You know, how much pressure are you guys feeling to do these things? Yeah, I can't tell you how many White Claw, the drink, that kids are posting and saying like vitamin water, you know, but they'll have a White Claw in there because it's getting some attention and it's getting people to go look at their post. Did they actually drink it? You know, some of these kids, I would say, no, I don't think they did. I genuinely don't. I think that they are trying to get attention and I think they want to fit into this group. Will they start? Probably. I don't know. But those are the conversations we need to have. And that's really hard because I remember having to have those clothes. And I remember telling my mom, if I don't have those, everybody at school is going to hate me. And so I think about our kids now, that being compounded. You know, it's a really tough, it's tough.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've kind of see both because I talk to a lot of parents for what we're doing with PICSA, and then I've got the youth team babies and all that they're doing. So it seems really tough to be a parent right now, and really tough to be a teen right now, and everybody it's just tough.
I mean, it wasn't easy when I was a teenager either, but yeah, it's just, I'm very thankful that there was not the social media presence. Like, it's just so different now than when, you know, any of us, I mean, Lillie, you might have grown up with social media, but it definitely was not there when I was a kid. And it's just really, 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 really tough. Not to mention, you know, you talk about alcohol, like the alcohol that's available now versus when I was a kid is drastically different. Drugs are stronger. Like, it's just not the same stuff that, you know, some people may have used when they were younger. And it's just a very different world. But I think that a lot of people maybe don't even realize that the alcohol and drugs are not the same as when we were kids, or younger. And that's probably something that more people should know.
Right.
Yeah, it is changing so fast because I'm 25, so I'm only like 10 years younger than some of the youth team. But when I was in high school, I didn't get a Snapchat until I got to college because it just wasn't a thing. And these social media sites just weren't huge yet, and smartphones weren't huge yet. And sometimes it makes me feel, I mean, I'm not even old, but I feel such a big divide of just even those 10 years with what they've grown up with and what we grew up with is just it's already so different. Times are just changing so quickly, and technology is so quickly updating, and all of it's just different.
I think you'll see that COVID's probably going to exacerbate that quite a bit too. I mean, you know, like now we're a year. It's not like it was like a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, but we've changed things so much for now almost a year, that, you know, it's just not going to be the same as it was before. Even if we don't have to wear masks anymore, right? Like, there's just so many other things that have changed during this time. So I think that you'll see some of that continuing as well.
Absolutely. Times are changing, and sometimes that change is a good thing, and sometimes it's very hard to get used to. But I know this has been a very long conversation, but do you guys have anything last sentiments that you want to leave parents with, or anything else you guys want to talk about or mention?
I think we covered quite a bit. So, I mean, there's nothing, just talk to your kids. That's what I would just talk to your kids.
And I would say just our last conversation about how quickly things have changed and how much ground we've covered in the last couple of years. You know, be easy on yourself and know that we're never going to get it right every time, but don't stop. There's no reason for us to not fight this and not talk to our kids and make sure that our teenage population is staying safe. Blaring red light, it's against the law. But, two, it affects things so much farther than just at home. So, I think don't give up. It seems like it's an endless battle. I think our last conversation we just left, it was like, oh, there's so much to do, and how are we going to do it? Because there's no way to do it. Like, we can do it. We just have to work together. The resources that Dr. Matthews mentioned earlier, I need to go and look at and read. I think that is incredibly important for parents to educate ourselves, because our kids are not necessarily always going to be the first to tell us about something. And I think that is one of the very first steps that we can all take.
Very, very good thoughts to leave us with. But I just wanted to thank you both again for coming on this podcast and sharing your great insight and having this conversation. I think parents really need to hear it, and that's why we're focusing on parents this month, and hope to get a lot of really good information out to them. And we've got some newsletters coming out. We're completely updating our website to have tons of resources for parents and thoughts and topics for them and ways to talk to their kids, because we've just been talking about how hard it is, and it is hard. But even though it's difficult, those conversations are ones that we really do need to have. So thank you both for being here, and thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this extra long podcast, but it has really good information. So if you've made it to the very end, thank you for that.